Support this podcast via our Patreon and get more writerly goodness. Visit patreon.com/nanocast to join up.
Welcome to NaNoWriMo Every Month. My name is J. Daniel Sawyer. I'm the author of some 20 books, 34 short stories, and numerous articles and other things, and I am your guide on this journey to use NaNoWriMo to level up to professional output levels. Welcome to Day 18. Today we're going to talk about that thing that you have been fighting all of this time. We're going to talk about the voices in your head. You've got a lot of voices in your head, and they come in two varieties. The first class are the voices of all the authors that you have loved. The way they turn a phrase, the way they tell a story, the way they bend an arc, the way they flip a character. These voices are all in your head. As you're at that keyboard, it's as if everyone whose reading has ever stuck with you is sort of sitting clustered around behind you, giving you advice for how you should handle this plot point or that character moment or that turn of phrase. One of the reasons that you do something like NaNoWriMo or the Bradbury Challenge, which is where you do a short story a week every week for a year, is that you have to write enough to find your own voice buried among all those voices that help shape what your voice is. It takes time to work those voices out of your head so that only your voice remains. And your voice will have been influenced by all those other voices, and it'll be influenced by the accent that you grew up with. And I'm not kidding here. The accent that you learned to speak with affects the way that your words go on the paper, because the speech you heard when you were pre-verbal forms a sort of musical template in your brain that you carry with you the rest of your life and that tells you what sounds right and what sounds kind of wrong. It's completely subconscious, it's very difficult to reprogram, and it's just one of those pieces that makes up your author voice. There's another kind of voice in your head, though, and these are the voices that will ruin your writing. And so much of the effort that a professional writer puts in involves shutting up these voices. The actual storytelling, that becomes very easy very quickly. But shutting these voices up so that you can work, that's difficult. These are the voices of the English teacher who told you you had no talent, of the literature professor who told you that you can't write a story that way, that you have to adhere to this formula, or that you have to write with a theme in mind, or that it has to be an important idea to be worth the effort of the reader to slog through the words. It's the voice of your older brother who told you that you sucked and there was never going to be anything good came out of your brain, so why are you trying? It's the voice of your mother who told you, the writing is very nice, dear, but you need to have something to fall back on, so just treat that as a hobby and don't really concentrate on it. It's the voice of your pastor who told you that nice people or good people don't write about certain things, or that they have to write about certain things that reinforce the values of whatever religion you grew up in. It's the voice of your preschool teacher or your nanny or your grandmother telling you, we don't use words like that, dear. Those aren't nice words. It's the voice of a critical boss who said, can't you do anything right? All of these voices that hem you in, that you're carrying around with you in your head all day, every day, the voices of shame and guilt and limitation, these voices create around your writerly subconscious a forest of self-censorship that you can lose yourself in. They limit your life, they limit your thinking, and they prevent you from telling the stories that are in your heart. They may prevent you from telling the stories that are in your heart so effectively that you don't even notice their presence, except that when you sit down at the keyboard, you have a lot of trouble figuring out what to say next. It's because, however many decades you've been alive, you have become habituated to not speaking without running your words by this committee of censorship that you've internalized through the process of growing up. And now don't get me wrong, the process of growing up is the process of learning when not to play, because sometimes playing is dangerous. You don't want to play at the edge of a cliff, particularly if you don't have any awareness of what gravity does, right? But when you're sitting down to write, you have to be able to play, or you will have no joy in your storytelling, and you may wind up not even having a story. When you sit at the keyboard, it's not just you. It's you and the voices in your head. And when you find a voice telling you, no, don't write that, sometimes you can give it the finger and go on and write it anyway and ignore it. Sometimes the voice is too loud and you have to stop and sort of consciously do battle with that voice. You can't write that. Well, why can't I write that? Well, that may come off to some audience members as being reactionary or racist. Well, I'm not intending it that way. Yes, but your audience will perceive it that way. And it can go on, and you have to keep hammering at that voice until it loses its power over you. And this is a process that can take years, and it is the hardest part of the writing process, especially because some of the things the voice tells you might be right, or they might be things you really care about. You may be someone who's really, really exceedingly revolted by racist characters, and yet you've got a fantasy story that turns on racism. You've got a big mountain to climb, especially if you're interested in making your racist character a well-rounded racist character instead of just a stereotype. Racism is the low-hanging fruit to pick from because it's something that every writer I've ever met worries about. But you can say the same thing for anything sexist or political or sexual or violent or profane or obscene. And if you write historical fiction, you're walking through a minefield of all of these things because every culture has different taboos. And writing historical fiction, you're going to be keenly aware of walking the line between taboos we have that they didn't have in your time period and culture, and taboos they had in the time period and culture that we don't have now, and making that difference accessible to your reader. But the voices in your head that are there to stop you, the forest of censorship you find yourself walking through, you have to let it go. If you wind up at the far end with a book that you really don't want to be associated with, you have the freedom to put it in a drawer or to release it under a pen name. But in order to grow as a writer, you have to let the ugly, the risky, the scary, the uncomfortable thoughts, the stories that go places that you really aren't sure about or that you have massive internal pressure against going for. You have to let those stories out. You have to work them out. Even if you never release them, the process of doing it will yield immense dividends to you as a writer throughout your career. Do not listen to those voices in your head. Make it a priority to tell them to go away. We, your readers, want to read what you have to say, not what all those voices say you shouldn't. And some of us will like it, and some of us will hate it, and that's okay. Because this is about you becoming a professional and writing the stories that move your soul. I'll see you tomorrow. NaNoWriMo Every Month is written and presented by J. Daniel Sawyer and produced by Artistic Whispers Productions. Visit our website at NaNoWriMoEveryMonth.com and leave a tip in the tip jar to support this podcast. NaNoWriMo Every Month is copyright 2015 by J. Daniel Sawyer and Artistic Whispers Productions and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license.